I was mid-sip of cheap champagne when my mother's voice echoed across the manicured lawn. At least one of my children made something of themselves. Before the sting could settle, gravel crunched. 3 matte black FBI Suburbans breached the gates, and the raid on my brother's perfect engagement began. The ocean breeze sweeping off the coast of Newport, Rhode Island, was supposed to be refreshing, but tonight it felt like it was carrying pure, unadulterated judgment. We were gathered at the sprawling 20-acre estate of Arthur Carmichael, a man whose wealth was only matched by his ego. Tonight was the engagement party for his daughter, Stephanie, and my older brother, Louis. To say Louis was the golden child of our family would be a catastrophic understatement. In my mother's eyes, Louis walked on water, cured the sick, and hung the moon. He was a 4th-year orthopedic surgery resident with a jawline carved from granite and a smile that could disarm a hostile nation. And me? I was Ciara, the family disappointment, the cautionary tale. Just over a year ago, I had abruptly quit my high-paying, high-profile job as a senior data analyst at a top-tier financial firm in Boston. I moved out of my luxury condo and into a modest, cramped apartment in a quiet suburb. I started working bizarre hours from a worn-out laptop, wearing sweatpants and dodging my mother's invasive questions about my 401k. I told my family I was freelancing and finding my passion. My mother, Brenda, took this as a personal attack on her social standing. "Ciara, darling, please tell me you aren't going to wear that cardigan in the official photographs," Brenda sneered, materializing beside me near a massive, melting swan ice sculpture. She rigged her eyes over my simple, off-the-rack navy dress. Brenda herself was dripping in rented diamonds and wearing a champagne-colored gown that desperately wanted to look custom-made. "It's chilly, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I took a sip of my champagne, my eyes scanning the perimeter of the estate. "It's an engagement party for a Carmichael, Ciara. Arthur is worth hundreds of millions. You could at least try not to look like you just finished a shift at a diner," she hissed, adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet. "Louis is marrying into American royalty. I just pray you don't embarrass him tonight. When people ask what you do, just tell them you're in digital consulting and leave it at that. Don't mention the apartment." I offered a tight, polite smile. "Sure, Mum. Digital consulting." She huffed and marched off toward a group of wealthy socialites, instantly plastering on a fake, dazzling smile. What Brenda didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that my abrupt career change wasn't a breakdown. It was a recruitment. During my time at the Boston firm, I had stumbled onto a massive, highly sophisticated money laundering network hidden within a series of shell companies. I brought the data to the authorities. Instead of just taking the files, the FBI and the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, offered me a highly classified contract. They needed an insider, a forensic accountant with my exact skill set, to trace the digital footprints of a syndicate washing cartel money through East Coast hedge funds, and the man sitting at the top of that syndicate, Arthur Carmichael, my brother's soon-to-be father-in-law. For the past 8 months, I had been working undercover from my cramped apartment, dismantling Arthur's empire bite by bite. When Louis announced his engagement to Stephanie, my handlers panicked. They thought my cover was blown. But it was a cosmic, horrifying coincidence. Louis had met Stephanie at a charity gala. He was completely oblivious to her family's dark reality, and because the operation was under strict gag orders, I couldn't warn him. I had to sit back, play the role of the struggling, eccentric sister, and watch my brother entangle his life with a criminal enterprise, praying the feds would build their case before the wedding bells rang. As the string quartet played softly in the background, I felt my phone vibrate twice in the hidden pocket of my dress. A text from Special Agent Thomas Ticker, my primary handler. Warrant signed. Judge just stamped it. "We are 10 minutes out. Stay out of the crossfire, Ciara." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked across the lawn at Louis, who was laughing heartily, his arm wrapped around Stephanie. She was beautiful, clad in a designer silk dress, flashing a 3-carat diamond ring that was likely paid for with blood money. I felt a pang of intense guilt. Louis was arrogant and oblivious, yes, but he wasn't a criminal. His life was about to explode, and I was the one holding the detonator. "Look at them," Brenda's voice startled me as she drifted back to my side, her wine glass half empty. Perfection. Louis has always known exactly what he wanted and how to get it. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "It's not too late for you, you know. Arthur mentioned he might have a low-level data entry position at his hedge fund. I basically begged him to consider you. It would be a favor to Louis. I don't think Arthur Carmichael's hedge fund is going to be hiring anytime soon, Mom," I said softly, checking the time on my watch. Brenda scoffed, rolling her eyes. "There you go again, that bitter jealousy. It's an ugly color on you, Chiara. Just because you threw your potential away doesn't mean you have to resent your brother's success." I didn't answer. I just watched the driveway, waiting for the storm to break. The dinner was a lavish affair served under a massive, fairy light-strung marquee tent. 150 of New England's elite sat at round tables draped in heavy white linen, dining on butter-poached lobster and truffle risotto. I was seated at table 12, strategically placed near the back, sandwiched between Stephanie's deaf great-uncle and a snobby corporate lawyer who had spent the last 40 minutes explaining why poor people just needed to invest better. The head table, elevated on a slight dais, held Arthur, his fiercely Botoxed wife Louis, Stephanie, and my beaming mother. As the dessert plates were cleared, the clinking of a silver spoon against crystal echoed through the tent. Arthur Carmichael stood up, his tailored tuxedo straining slightly against his waistline. He projected the aura of an untouchable king. "Family, friends, and esteemed guests," Arthur began, his booming voice amplified by the microphone. "Tonight we celebrate the merging of two wonderful families. Louis, you are a fine young man, a doctor, a healer. You bring honor to the Carmichael name, and we are thrilled to welcome you." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Arthur droned on for another 5 minutes about legacy, wealth, and trust, ironic, considering I had spent the morning freezing offshore accounts tied to his Cayman's trust. Then Arthur handed the microphone to my mother. Brenda stood up, smoothing her dress, glowing under the spotlight. She cleared her throat. "Thank you, Arthur. When Louis was a little boy, I knew he was destined for greatness. He was always driven, always focused." She paused, looking out over the crowd. Her eyes drifted over the tables until they locked onto me in the back. A cruel, knowing smile touched her lips. She couldn't resist. She had an audience of the wealthiest people she had ever met, and she needed to establish that Louis's pedigree came from her, while distancing herself from her defective offspring. "Raising children is a gamble," Brenda said, her voice dripping with faux melancholy. "You pour your heart into them. Some rise to the occasion, becoming brilliant surgeons who marry into spectacular families." She gestured to Louis. "And others, well, others lose their way. They stumble. They give up solid careers to play on their computers at home. It breaks a mother's heart to see one child become a spectacular success and the other become, frankly, a failure." A dead silence fell over the tent. Even the snooty lawyer next to me shifted uncomfortably. I felt 150 pairs of eyes swivel in my direction. Louis looked down at the table, his face flushing scarlet. But he didn't intervene. He never did. "But tonight," Brenda recovered brightly, "we focus on the success. To Louis and Stephanie." "To Louis and Stephanie," the crowd murmured, eager to move past the awkward public humiliation. I picked up my water glass, my hand perfectly steady. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt ice-cold clarity. My phone buzzed again. One single word on the screen, "Now." Before anyone could even take a sip of this celebratory toast, a sound cut through the gentle ocean breeze. The heavy, unmistakable roar of massive engines. The security guards at the perimeter of the marquee turned around just as the headlights hit them. 3 black armored Chevrolet Suburbans tore across the immaculate front lawn, their tires tearing up thick chunks of expensive turf. A 4th vehicle, a tactical command truck, blocked the main iron gates. "What in the world?" Arthur boomed into the microphone, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Security, get those vehicles off my lawn." Nobody moved. The doors of the Suburbans flew open simultaneously. Men and women in dark windbreakers emblazoned with bright yellow letters FBI poured out, followed by a tactical unit in full body armor. "FBI, nobody move. Keep your hands visible," the lead tactical officer bellowed, his voice echoing off the canvas of the tent. Panic erupted. Socialites screamed, dropping champagne flutes. The lawyer next to me dove under the table so fast he hit his head on a chair. I remained seated, calmly crossing my legs. Special Agent Thomas Decker, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a severe buzz cut and cold gray eyes, strode into the center of the marquee. He held a thick manila folder in his hand. 2 armed agents flanked him. Arthur Carmichael. Necker's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. Arthur puffed out his chest, stepping down from the dais. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am playing golf with the governor tomorrow." "You are making a catastrophic career mistake, Agent." "Save it for the judge, Arthur," Decker said flatly. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and violation of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act." Stephanie shrieked, clutching Louis's arm. Louis looked like he had been struck by lightning. "What? This is a mistake. My future father-in-law is a legitimate businessman." Louis yelled, stepping forward. "Sit down, son, before you get an obstruction charge," an agent snapped, putting a firm hand on Louis's chest. Brenda was hyperventilating, clutching her pearls. "Excuse me, officer." "Agent," she cried out, her voice trembling. "There is a mistake. We are the Davises. We have nothing to do with this. Please, my son is a doctor. Just get these men out of here. We're having a party." Necker ignored her entirely. He walked past the head table, past a stunned Arthur, who was currently being aggressively handcuffed by 2 tactical officers. Decker's eyes scanned the room until they found table 12. He walked straight down the center aisle, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He stopped right in front of me. The entire tent went dead silent again. The only sound was the ticking of Arthur Carmichael's handcuffs. My mother gasped from the front of the room. "Agent, get away from her. That's my daughter. She's just a failed freelancer. She doesn't know anything about whatever this is." Agent Decker didn't look at my mother. He looked down at me and offered a rare, genuine smile. He extended his hand. "We got the offshore ledgers secured, Miss Davis. Every single account you flagged. The wire transfers from the Caymans were frozen 3 minutes ago," Decker said, his voice loud enough for the entire silent tent to hear. "The director sends his personal regards. It's the cleanest forensic trap the Bureau has seen in a decade. Incredible work." I took his hand and stood up, smoothing down my cheap navy dress. "Thank you, Agent Decker. I assume the grand jury subpoenas are ready." "Signed and sealed," Decker confirmed. I finally turned my head to look at the head table. Louis's jaw was practically on the floor. Stephanie was sobbing mascara tears into a napkin. And my mother, Brenda? She stood frozen, her face completely drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, as the reality of my little computer games finally crashed down upon her. The silence in the marquee was finally broken by the sharp metallic zip of a tactical agent securing a thick plastic tie around the wrists of Arthur's chief financial officer, who had been trying to discreetly army crawl out the back of the tent. "Chyla?" The voice was weak, trembling, and entirely stripped of its usual bravado. I turned to see my brother Louis standing there. His expensive tuxedo jacket was unbuttoned, his bow tie askew. He looked like a little boy who had just watched his balloon float away into the clouds. Only the balloon was his entire future, and the clouds were federal indictments. Before I could answer, my mother broke through her paralysis. Brenda lunged forward, her high heels sinking into the soft turf, and grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her acrylic nails digging into my skin. "What is this, Ciara? What did you do?" she hissed, a voice of frantic, breathy whisper. "Tell them to stop. Tell them they have the wrong people. You're ruining your brother's night. You're ruining everything." I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off my arm. "I didn't ruin anything, Mom. Arthur ruined it the second he decided to use the Carmichael Trust to wash $80 million of Sinaloa cartel money through Boston real estate. I just did the math." "Cartel?" Stephanie shrieked from the head table. She had abandoned her crying fit and was now blaring at her father, who was being aggressively escorted toward the mobile command center. "Daddy, what is she talking about?" "Don't say a word, Stephanie," called Mitchell Sterling. Arthur bellowed back over his shoulder before an agent shoved him into the back of a Suburban. Mitchell Sterling was the Carmichael's high-powered defense attorney, a man known for making evidence magically disappear. But even he couldn't unfreeze the offshore accounts I had locked down an hour ago. Agent Decker stepped between me and my mother, his physical presence acting as a brick wall. "Mom, I need you to step back. Ms. Davis is a classified asset to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Interfering with her is a federal offense." Brenda staggered back as if she had been physically struck. She looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. The furled freelancer in the cheap dress was suddenly the most powerful person in the room, flanked by heavily armed federal agents. Her reality was fracturing, and I could see the exact moment the delusion shattered in her eyes. But the drama was far from over. A younger agent, a woman named Ramirez who had been part of my remote support team, trotted up to Decker, holding a digital tablet. "Sir, we have a complication. We just raided the Carmichael charity offices downtown. We found the secondary ledgers." Decker frowned. "And? Ramirez shot a highly uncomfortable glance at Louis. "The offshore shell companies. They weren't just funneled through Arthur's hedge fund. The mud was the thing she truly noticed. The mud was the first thing she truly noticed. Specifically, the pediatric orthopedic wing. Loch. The blood drained completely from Louis's face. He swayed on his feet. "So?" Louis stammered, his voice cracking. "It's a charity. Arthur set it up for me to run once I finished my residency. He wanted me to have a legacy." "Dr. Davis," Decker said, his voice dropping an octave, taking on the tone of interrogator. "Did you sign any administrative documents for that foundation in the last 6 months?" Louis looked around wildly, panic setting in. Yes. Of course I did. Stephanie brought me the paperwork. They were grant approvals for medical equipment. Prosthetics for kids." Stephanie, who had been listening intently, suddenly straightened up. The tears vanished, replaced by a cold, desperate survival instinct. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Louis' chest. "He knew," Stephanie screamed, her voice echoing across the silent lawn. "Louis knew where the money was coming from. He's the director of the foundation. He signed the transfer approvals. If my father goes down, Louis goes down with him." A collective gasp swept through the remaining guests. The smooty corporate lawyer, still peeking out from under table 12, whispered, "Oh, he is so going to prison." "Stephanie, what are you doing?" Louis cried, stepping toward her, absolute betrayal written across his handsome features. "I love you. I trusted you. I'm not going to federal prison for you, Louis." She snapped back, her true colors flying higher than the FBI flags. "You're the signatory. It's your name on the wire transfers." "She set him up," I said quietly to Decker. Decker nodded grimly. "Classic insulation. Arthur needed a clean, respectable patsy with no criminal record to act as the fall guy for the medical charity front. A brilliant, naive young doctor marrying into the family is the perfect shield. Brenda let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She grabbed her hair, completely losing her aristocratic composure. No, my son is a doctor. He saves lives. He doesn't launder money. Chiara, do something. You worked for them. Tell them he didn't do it. The irony was thicker than the Rhode Island humidity. Less than an hour ago, she had publicly humiliated me, calling me a failure in front of 150 people. Now, she was begging the failure to save her golden child from a 20-year federal sentence. I looked at Louis. He was hyperventilating, his hands shaking violently. For all his arrogance, for all the times he had passively let our mother tear me down to build him up, he was still my brother, and I knew the data better than anyone. Agent Ramirez, I said, my voice steady, slipping effortlessly into my professional persona. Pull up the metadata on the digital signatures for the Foundation's wire transfers. Ramirez tapped her screen and handed it to me. I scrolled through the forensic logs I had decrypted 2 nights ago. Stephanie is lying, I said aloud, making sure my voice carried. Look at the IP addresses for the times the documents were signed. Louis' signature was authorized from a terminal in the Carmichael Hedge Fund building. Louis has been on a 72-hour surgical rotation at Mass General for the last 3 days. He couldn't possibly have signed them. Decker looked over my shoulder at the screen. Someone forged his digital authorization. Stephanie, I said, looking directly at the furious bride-to-be. She had his passwords. She probably told him she was managing their wedding registry. Instead, she was authorizing illegal wire transfers to the Cayman. Stephanie's face contorted in rage. You little bitch, she spat at me. Agent Ramirez, Decker said calmly, ignoring Stephanie's outburst. Cuff the bride. Wire fraud, conspiracy, and forgery. Apart. Osborne. I think gave sore right home. As the agents moved in to arrest Stephanie, she fought like a wildcat, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush, completely ruining her designer silk gown as they wrestled her into the back of a tactical vehicle. Louis collapsed into a white folding chair, burying his face in his hands, openly weeping. His perfect life, his perfect fiancée, his perfect future, all of it, was a meticulously crafted lie designed to use him as a human shield for a criminal empire. I walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't look up, but he leaned into the touch, shaking violently. It's going to be okay, Louis, I said softly. You're clear. I made sure they couldn't tie it to you. Brenda stood a few feet away, watching us. Her mouth was open, but no words came out. The foundation of her entire worldview had just been bulldozed. The billionaire in-laws were cartel money launderers. The perfect bride was a manipulative felon. And the daughter she had written off as a complete and utter disappointment was the only reason her son wasn't leaving the party in handcuffs. 72 hours later, the dust had somewhat settled, though the media storm was just beginning. The headline across every major news outlet read, Newport Nightmare, Billion IR hurt, Carmichael arrested in massive cartel laundering sting. I was sitting in a sterile, brightly lit conference room at the FBI field office in Boston. My laptop was open, displaying the final decrypted routing numbers that would allow the government to seize the remaining offshore assets. The door opened and Agent Decker walked in carrying 2 cups of terrible breakroom coffee. He set one down in front of me. Arthur is singing, Decker said, taking a seat across from me. Once he realized his lawyer couldn't suppress the digital evidence you secured, he flipped. He's offering up 3 cartel lieutenants to shave 10 years off his sentence. What about Stephanie? I asked, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. Refusing to speak without a deal. but we have her IP logs dead to rights. She's looking at 5 to 8 years for the forgery and conspiracy alone." Decker paused, looking at me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Your brother gave his official statement this morning. He surrendered all the Foundation documents. He's completely clean, naive as hell, but clean." "Good," I murmured, staring at the screen. "He's in the lobby," Decker said quietly, "with your mother. They asked to see you." I closed my laptop. A part of me wanted to slip out the back exit, to return to my quiet, secretive life and leave the wreckage of my family dynamics behind. But you can't run from the ghost of your past if you want to properly lay it to rest. "Send them in," I said. A minute later, Louis and Brenda walked into the conference room. They looked exhausted. Louis had dark circles under his eyes, and he was wearing a simple gray sweater, no designer labels, no Rolex. Brenda looked 10 years older. The arrogant glow of Newport High society had been entirely stripped from her. They stood awkwardly by the door until I gestured to the chairs across from me. They sat down cautiously as if the chairs might be rigged to explode. "Hey, Chloe," Louis said, his voice raspy. He looked down at his hands, twisting the spot on his finger where his engagement ring used to be. "The agents told me how long you've been working on this. How you specifically isolated my name from the indictments. I followed the data, Louis. The data proved you didn't have mens rea criminal intent. You were just a useful idiot for them," I said. It was harsh, but we were long past sugarcoating reality. Louis winced, but nodded slowly. "I know. I was so blinded by the lifestyle, by the prestige. I didn't ask the questions I should have. I'm sorry, Chiara. I'm sorry for everything, for not standing up for you at the party, for letting Mom." He trailed off, swallowing hard. "It's fine, Louis. Focus on your residency. Be a good doctor. That's your second chance. Don't waste it." Then I turned my gaze to Brenda. She fidgeted with the strap of her purse. She couldn't meet my eyes. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, until the weight of it forced her to speak. "Ciara," she began, her voice quivering. I don't know what to say. I was wrong. I was so horribly wrong about you. I thought you had thrown your life away." "No, Mom," I corrected her, my voice eerily calm. "You thought I was no longer useful for your social climbing. You didn't care about my happiness or my career. You cared about how I looked on a Christmas card next to your surgeon's son and his billionaire in-laws." Brenda flinched as if I had slapped her. Tears welled up in her eyes. "That's not true. I'm your mother. I want what's best for you. You literally stood up in front of 150 people and called me a failure to get a polite chuckle out of a man who is currently facing federal racketeering charges," I stated flatly. "You wanted a golden child and a scapegoat. You got them. The only problem is the scapegoat had to save the golden child from the wolves you threw him to." "I want to make it right," Brenda pleaded, reaching across the table. I pulled my hands back before she could touch me. "Please, Chiara, let's start over. You're a hero. You work for the FBI. We can tell everyone." "I don't work for them, Mum. I'm an independent contractor, and my work is strictly classified, which means you don't get to brag about this at your country club luncheons. You don't get to spin this into a victory for yourself." I stood up, packing my laptop into my bag. "I love you both," I said, looking at my brother and my mother, "because you're my family, but I am done playing a role in this toxic dynamic. Louis, you have my number if you need to talk. Mom, I think we need some space. A lot of space." "Chiara, please don't walk out like this," Brenda cried, standing up. I paused at the door, looking back at the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel small. "Goodbye, Mom. Oh, and by the way," I offered a small, razor-sharp smile. "I'm still wearing the off-the-rack navy dress." I walked out of the conference room, the heavy metal door clicking shut behind me, sealing them in their reality while I stepped freely into mine. The air outside the federal building smelled like exhaust fumes and city rain, but to me it was the sweetest, cleanest air I had ever breathed. I pulled my phone from my pocket and texted Agent Decker, "I'm ready for the next file." The reply came 3 seconds later. "Check your encrypted drive. See you Monday, Davis." I smiled, slipping my phone away, and disappeared into the crowded Boston streets. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the failure. I was the ghost in the machine, and I had work to do. Have you ever been completely underestimated by your own family, only to prove them spectacularly wrong? Tell me your story in the comments below. If Ciara's ultimate revenge through success gave you chills, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a plot twist, and subscribe for more insane, real-life drama stories. Don't let anyone write your narrative.